I stand in front of you today as a dreamer. I stand in front of you as a Latina, a Mexicana, and a female scientist. My identity is a source of my strength because my existence is resistance. As a selfless act of love, my parents brought me from Mexico to the US in order to have access to higher education. And to honor their sacrifice, me puse las pilas, and I became the first in my family to obtain a degree. As an undergrad with DACA status, I had limited access to financial aid, and this meant that I had to work multiple full-time jobs just to cover tuition, and this took time away from my studies. And meanwhile, my father often had to travel out of the state to find work, and this left me to help my mom look after my younger siblings. Work, school, and being the head of household was often difficult to handle. Eventually, I found myself having to make the choice between school and family. And one of the most difficult decisions I ever made that felt like the biggest betrayal to my family was moving to California to get my PhD. Especially during this last year, when my family had to evacuate because of Hurricane Harvey and I was stuck 1,000 miles away. Getting into graduate school wasn't easy. Institutional and systemic barriers that already exist against me as a Latina and as a woman are only heightened as an undocumented student. And yet here I am, making my parents' sacrifices count by getting my PhD at the University of California, Irvine. I'm helping make a difference for Latinx and undocumented students who want to pursue higher education. And current federal policies like the rescinding of DACA and the inability for this administration to pass legislation to protect dreamers obstruct our ability to create a diverse academic community. And unfortunately, policies within higher education systems are only enhancing it by creating harmful learning environments that are personally attacking our undocumented students. For example, restricting undocumented students from in-state tuition, a sad tragedy affecting students in Arizona right now and in other states. Funding opportunities for undocumented students are already incredibly limited, and this only places additional barriers to dreamers who seek academic safety and refuge within our school systems. We contribute to this nation in invaluable ways. Dreamers are in our scientific communities, and dreamers are helping fight climate change. Dreamers are doing the science that will bring this nation to the next level. This fight is not just about us, but it's also about this nation losing prospective students because we stand to lose talented minds if they don't find support here. We desperately need a scientific community that will reflect the demographics of our nation. To remain academically and globally competitive, we have to harness all the powerful work of all dreamers and all students, regardless of background, sexual orientation, or citizenship status. And as I stand here today, surrounded by influential people of power, I want to say that change starts with you, because a true ally will make their voice heard. A true ally will use their influence for positive change, because everybody here plays an important and critical role in ensuring that this nation remains a safe place for our students to learn, free from the policies that are creating divisions within our community. So don't stand idly by while your community and your colleagues are hurting. I encourage you to step up and make your voice heard.
Does it make sense to incarcerate people who have a disease? I march today because I'm mad and I'm scared. But we cannot afford just to be mad and scared. We have to get up and we have to speak up. Today I'm here with my son, Eli, who is 7 months old. I march for Eli because I will not have my son, our children, grow up in a society of racism, sexism, misogyny, bigotry, white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, denial of science, denial of climate change, denial of the basic human values of dignity and compassion. I end with the words of Senator Elizabeth Warren, who said, "We can whimper, we can whine, or we can fight back. We come here to stand shoulder to shoulder to make clear we are here. We will not be silent. We will not play dead. Science, not silence. Science, not silence. Science, not silence. Science, not silence."
But through the last year, this presidency has ignored science, has trampled on science, and has made evidence-based thinking partisan. They've shrunk the size of Bears Ear National Park. Trump signed an executive order restricting immigrants, including preeminent scientists, from entering this country. Trump's administration and government has ended the National Commission on Forensic Science. They've cut millions of dollars of funding for sex education programs. They've prevented EPA staff members from going to climate change conferences. They've made it easier for oil and gas companies to emit methane, an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. Trump has signed an executive order to ensure that the nation's electricity can be produced from coal and natural gas without burden. He's put a pack of climate deniers like Scott Pruitt and Rick Perry in power. There are reports of staff not being told to use phrases like climate change, emissions reduction, or the Paris Agreement. And finally, he left the Paris Agreement. This is how bad it's gotten. So thank you for coming out.
I use my science training to inform the work I do with underrepresented students. And so who do I mean by the underrepresented? I mean minority students. I mean people with disabilities, the LGBTQ+ community, students who are low income, the first ones in their family to go to college, and across most of the sciences, we're talking about women. The challenges are real for underrepresented students in science. We have to overcome the reality that few or no faculty share our identities or fully understand our situation on campus and how we have to relate back to our communities. For too long, science has been limited to a subset of our society, and as a result, my mission is to help train the indigenous Albert Einstein, the Latinx Marie Curie, and the gender non-conforming Jonas Salk.
As teenagers, we have a clear view of the future of STEM in our country, and we see what is changing and what isn't. In our classrooms, we see achievement gaps, male and white students dominating the science courses, problems reflected in a decrease in diversity in the STEM field despite efforts to increase it. Our goal as an organization of students is to change this.
In addition to these gaps, we see the separation of STEM and the humanities, including politics, pushed from a young age, and thus shocking political actions tied to science aren't as shocking as they should be.
I see the 6 girls in my physics class huddled around one lab table, worried to speak up, as the 8 guys sit across 3 tables dominating the class.
Fund science communication, not as an afterthought, not as a superficial accessory to the more important process of science, but as an equal partner critical to the success of the whole scientific mission. Much of this critical work is undervalued and underappreciated and underfunded.
I don't care about guns. I'm a public health researcher trained in psychology, and I care about survival. It's time, actually long past time, for the federal government to fund wide-ranging public health research on gun violence prevention. Thank you.
Those who believe that science has no borders, we march. As those who believe that science serves us all, we march. As those who dream and those who keep the dream, we march. We march for ourselves and for our posterity.
Now, you may think that the power and relevance of science are self-evident, but do not expect science to speak for itself. We must use whatever megaphones we can.
My fight for 21st century, my fight for cure started when I was 5, but I guess it started sooner. On the day I was born with a rare disease, a rheopathy called Noonan syndrome. Rare is not really rare. There are over 7,000 rare diseases in the world, affecting 30 million Americans. 95% of them don't have treatments. Treatments can take a long time to develop and cost billions. I don't have that money in my big blue piggy bank. That is why I asked for the government's help to pass 21st century cures and increase research funding to smack down the horrible diseases.
But science doesn't just save lives, science saves nature. And that's why at the Nature Conservancy, we stand up for science. And this year, science showed us that nature can help in a major way with the greatest challenge of all, climate change. If we don't stand up for science, nature loses, and so do we. So as a scientist and as a mother, I ask you to use your voice for science. Call your representatives. Call them again, and when you get really frustrated, call them again. In the words of the great scientist Jane Goodall, never give up. Thank you.
Our research has connected neighborhood amenities, including different destinations, streets, and land use policies to obesity and cardiovascular disease. Other work has connected neighborhood food access, public transportation, and housing to a host of health concerns, including nutrition, social isolation, depression, and stress. Most importantly, the creation of healthy communities must be equitable to ensure that all people have chances to live healthy lives. Urban planners, city governments, and public health practitioners work towards health-focused neighborhood changes. They install bike lanes, renovate parks, and work to design spaces where everyone can prosper. Unfortunately, our research has shown that these changes are not happening equally across all neighborhoods.
I wanted to use my scientific training for broader societal benefit. I wanted to leverage the international language of science to build bridges between countries, sectors, and communities, help bring scientific evidence to global policy discussions. This is why I'm passionate about the work we do at AAAS. You've heard a few minutes ago our CEO, Rush Holt, talk about our organization. And even though our name says American Association for the Advancement of Science, we are a global organization with members all around the world. And part of our mission is to use science to build bridges between peoples and nations. Our international programs seek to encourage scientific exchange across borders. And I believe, I'm telling you all of this because I believe our work today is more important than ever. The US government's image and capabilities to positively engage internationally are being diminished and degraded. And I am concerned. The principles that once attracted me to work in this country are under threat. The position of the US as a global science leader and premier destination for top talent is still under threat. From travel bans, border walls, proposed extreme vetting criteria for visa applicants, to the withdrawal from international organizations like UNESCO, and from global agreements based on science, like the Paris Climate Agreement. This is still to our detriment, as it was when I stood here in the crowd 1 year ago, so we haven't made much progress. To remain the world leader in advancing scientific knowledge and innovation, The U.S. science and technology enterprise must continue to capitalize on the international and multicultural environment within which it operates.
I want to talk about the Clean Water Act. That was created in 1972. Of course, the EPA was created along with that. Right after the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, my state, burned in 1969. Yes, next year it will be 50 years, and the Cuyahoga River has improved much through science, but we still have much more work to do. We need science to keep our water clean. Historically, universities have helped EPA create guidance systems, standards, and new and innovative ways to achieve its objectives. Water events are related to climate warming. This week, Mauna Loa levels of CO2 are 409 parts per million. What do we need to measure this climate warming? 1, 2, 3, science. EPA's budget has been slashed, and it's becoming difficult for them to meet the goals of the Clean Water Act. In Ohio, EPA has slowed the benchmarking process of water quality in streams and rivers necessary to identify the hot spots of pollution. We need money for EPA and public and private research institutions to support the Clean Water Act. Regulation must be based on 1, 2, 3, science. Nationwide, the drinking water infrastructure is in dire condition and rapidly deteriorating, such as in Flint. This affects low-income populations disproportionately. Environmental justice is possible through 1, 2, 3, science.
Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. That's where I tried to come last year to the march. I actually was stopped. And unfortunately, at that time, I guess the officers didn't think that a brother was coming to the science march. I know that's right. So they stopped me, and then you guys rallied and then marched, and then I never got here, but I'm here today. Is that right now, unless we break in those silos to create one movement, we will not be successful. We must come together as one movement, fighting together against Black Lives, for Black Lives Matter, fighting together for those who are in the LGBTQI community, fighting together for those who are fighting for science and climate change and an environment and immigration. We must come together as humans. This is not about Republican or Democrat. This is about humanity. But right now, from Standing Rock to Flint, people are still fighting. And in Flint, almost 4 years later, they still don't have clean water today.
But just last week, the state decided it was no longer going to provide bottled water for the citizens of Flint. That we were on our own. And the scariest thing of all is that Flint is not alone. There are dozens of cities all over America with lead levels that are worse than Flint ever was. Cities like East Chicago, Pittsburgh, Portland, and dozens of other cities around the nation. We need for the government to listen to science. For the EPA to focus on making sure kids stay safe. For the EPA to focus on making sure kids stay safe. And to do its job and not cut back on policies that hope to protect kids like me and all my friends back in Flint. So for the sake of Flint kids and kids all over America, I continue the march for science!
Woo! And when we are done marching, you've got to keep acting. You've got to go out and vote. Find out who to vote for. Go ask your electorates, do they understand the science of climate change? Do they understand science? And then go to the booths. In the meantime, you can also text this number that the team here has worked out. It's 40649. That's 40649.
4649. And if you text words like the EPA, climate, research, or scientist, you'll get a text back and it'll tell you other things that you can do in the meantime.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. And before I tell you guys where we're going to meet up for the march, really quickly we want the cameraman here to give us another one of those selfie things. So please, everyone, hold your signs up. Nice, nice, nice. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
You look so good. They look so good. They're so exciting.
Beautiful. Boom, clap. Can we get that, guys? Okay, okay. Science, not silence.
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 Science, not silence.